I feel like the guy from the Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
No, you got them all.
Oh, okay, thank you.
They gave him enough for everybody.
Oh, for everybody. Okay, I'm sorry. What, sweetie? I don't need this. Oh, you don't? Okay. Thank you. Just a one page.
While the handouts are making their way around, and let me just give you just a little bit of background. Former member of our Sunday school class one day, ready to start my lesson, and I think they were just looking for any way to keep me from teaching. But said, you know, there are questions that I have about the Bible. I've been in church all of my life, and I feel like I don't know anything sometimes. And I remember those feelings. I still have those feelings at times. And so the way it started was, I said, well, you know, write your questions down and I'll ask Dr. Cobbin. No. And we didn't get any questions. So we sat and we talked, and I asked Jim Hall if he would help and teach some of that, and we would just take a quarter, and instead of going through the regular lesson, we would just put something together. Well, that never happened. It never happened. One thing and another happens, and one thing moves another. So I had talked with Dr. Cobbin, and he said, boy, this would be a great Wednesday night study. Let's see if we can do that. That was about a year ago. And again, one thing and another happened, it didn't happen. So he and I met in his office one day, and we put this wonderful course syllabus together. Actually, he did. And we sort of brainstormed. And this is what came out of it. So we're going to get started. And I want to get started. I feel like when I teach and I do this, I really need to go to the Lord in prayer. And I'm going to do that this morning, or this evening. It is evening, I think.
Yes.
So I'll bow your heads and pray with me for just a moment. May the beauty of God be reflected in my eyes. The love of God be reflected in my hands. The wisdom of God be reflected in my words. And the knowledge of God flow from my heart to all who might see and who might hear me. Amen. Just to give you a little bit of background as I flip around here, a little bit more background. Next week, so that will show you that there will be some continuity, I hope. We're going to talk about the Exodus period and the story of Moses. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite stories. And we're going to talk about the importance of Exodus in Old Testament theology and perspective. And actually, we might even talk about how it reflects on New Testament theology as well. Depends. If we want to double the time, we could probably do that. This evening, we're going to talk about we being session 3. We're going to talk about the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and I've kind of changed this around a little bit because I want to flow through the Bible a little bit as we go through this. We're going to talk about Torah and Mosaic law. And this will encompass Genesis through Deuteronomy. Greg last week did a great job of bringing us through Genesis and through the creation era and so forth. And I loved the statement that Greg made in his presentation when he talked about a day and time. One of my I guess I'll call it a pet peeve, or those who think that a day it runs 24 hours and time is based on the rotation of the earth and its evolution around its star. And Greg's reference to the Psalm of 1,000 years, I thought was very appropriate. The other thing I really enjoyed, Greg, was the reference to science. I have a friend who's going to be with the Lord. He was a physicist. He was a wonderful, wonderful self-taught Bible scholar. He forgot more than I'll ever know in my entire life. And he would talk about his education, and he would talk about the value of science and the Lord. You know, for every new creation of science, we get a little more closely related to God, and a little bit more understanding of God's creation and His purpose for us. I have, in addition to the stated purpose that you talked about with Dr. Cobbin the first night, I have one additional personal goal that I'd like to see happen. I'd like to encourage, if you don't spend every single day talking and reading your Bible and studying the Bible in some way, I hope that this stimulates you to adopt that as a part of your everyday life. You will gain from it. You will grow as a person, not just a Christian, but you'll grow as a person. You will mature in your faith and your belief. It's the only way I know of that's going to happen. Dr. Cobbin's sermons are stimulating, but he's feeding it to us. You need to read it yourself. It's and look at what God is speaking to you in your heart. So to begin with, I have some questions for you. These are rhetorical, okay? So if you can answer these, fine, but you don't have to. Why is it so terribly important to study the Bible every day? Think about it. Why is it important? I've already given you some reasons. Why spend our time in studying the Old Testament? Why is that so terribly important to study the Old Testament? After all, it's old. I mean, that was before Jesus. Who cares, right?
People haven't changed that much. I see and hear so many things every day that the Bible deals with. It keeps me out of a lot of serious trouble on occasion too.
That's right.
There's so many things out there.
That's true.
Even the ones we choose to ignore.
That's true. How many of you here tonight can know how many books are in the Old Testament? How many? Week before last. How many knew that? All right. How many of you know how many books are in the New Testament? Okay. You don't have to answer that. I might tell you. Look up. I think if you take a look in Jim's outline, I think you can see the answers there. I will tell you there are a total of 66, so all you got to do is figure out what the division is. And I'll tell you another way to remember that too. You'll always remember how many books are in the book of Isaiah because it matches the number of books in the Bible. Who can recite all 66 books in the Bible in order without making a mistake?
I can think of a people.
I don't think I can.
Gary
Can do it. Gary can do it, right, Gary?
I'm a product of Bible drill, so I know
Are you a product of Bible drill? You can do it. I know. Anybody that's been through the Bible drill, I'll bet you
Now,
can
my
do
wife
it.
can.
She can do it?
She can do it, yeah.
Oh, we're gonna wait till she has her anesthesia, and we'll go up and ask her.
Yeah.
I can think about the prophets, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah,
Yeah.
Malachi, Zechariah.
Good for you, all right. He just did my lesson this spring, didn't he? He did. How about that? That's good, Gary, thanks, I don't have to do that.
We have children in the children's department that can do it.
Yeah, Aurora can.
Oh, I believe it. How many of you read your Bible every day? Say I do, if you do. How many read your Bible? I do. How many of you don't? Ah, see, don't mess up.
I miss some days.
You miss some days? All right. I don't think I miss very many days, especially during the school year. We're going to begin the lesson. We're going to talk about the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And there's going to be four. We're going to talk about four patriarchs. We're going to talk about Abram, who's Abraham. Now, you can give you some biblical references. Chapter 12 through 23 of Genesis. If you take a look at your handout, you can follow along with that. Abraham's story began near the convergence of the Tigris and the Euphrates River in the village of Haran. God chose Abraham. Now this is going to be quick, all right? God chose Abraham as the father of the Hebrew people. God had made a covenant with Abraham, and this is a little bit of the covenant. He promises, I will make you the father of a multitude of nations, I am changing your name from Abram to Abraham. He did that, didn't he? For you will be the father of many nations. I will make you extremely fruitful. Your descendants will become many nations, and kings will be among them. I will always be your God, the God of your descendants after you, and I will give you and your descendants the land of Canaan forever. There's another side to that, and I'll just shortcut it. He intends to be that he be our God, and that we recognize and worship Him as our God. And that is the message from Genesis through Revelation, where God will walk among us. Why do you think God, I'm going to spend a little more time on Abraham here, but why do you think God made a covenant with the people? I mean, you think about it, and this is my take on it. It was because of Adam's sins and the fall of man. God's attention is now focused on a plan of redemption. Adam and Eve sinned, got kicked out of the garden. So God needed to come up with this plan of redemption, and God wanted a people through whom He could work to produce a reflection of Himself. We are made in God's image, and though whom He can, I can get that out. Spread the message of redemption to the entire world. It is available to all, and we see that reflected throughout the Bible. at the time God leads Adam to his final destination in Canaan, something happens. His 90-year-old wife, who we're going to talk about in a moment, gives birth. She gives birth to a son. She gives birth to a son named Isaac. Isaac is the second patriarch that we're going to talk about today. We can find information about Isaac, chapters 24 through 26 of Genesis for your own reading pleasure. He is the second father of promise. Abraham's promises are passed down to Isaac. Isaac fathered two sons. They were twins, Esau and Jacob. And that's all we're going to say about him for now. So we're going to look at Jacob. Now keep in mind, Jacob is the second son. That's important. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 27 through 35. The father of Israel. Jacob is known as the father of Israel. From his 12 sons came the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel. And from within these stories, there are the fabulous stories of the birth of a nation, of the birth of a people, the travel of people. And a comment that I would make before I talk about Joseph is that all of these men were imperfect men. They were human beings. They were flawed. They were not perfect. They made mistakes. They even lied. They even cheated a little bit. But they were faithful servants of God. And God recognized that. And so I think it's important to remember that as we go through this, these are men and women. These are not gods, they're men and women, just like you and I. Take a look at Joseph. I included Joseph because that's the point I think we may start next week. Look at verses 37 through 50. He was a leader. He was really a later leader of Israel. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. Joseph raises to a place of prominence in Egypt, and he becomes very important. And I think the Bible uses the term he was a righteous man. His family comes to Egypt as a result of a great famine. They were hungry. And so where do you go? You go to family, right? Even if you haven't been very nice to them. And they are reunited with him reunited at him. At his death is the point at which the Hebrew slaves become enslaved for 400 years. And that is a good jumping off point for next week. We're going to talk a little bit about the matriarchs. And I have in parentheses there because I just thought it was kind of nice. They're the four mothers that we're going to talk about. The first was Sarai, renamed Sarah by God. You can begin in chapter 17, around verse 16. I didn't write all of the references down for her, but just a place to start. She did not become a mother until she was 90 years old. 90 years old, as I said a while ago. God promised Abraham that Sarah would be the mother of nations, and she was. She was the mother of Isaac. Isaac married a lady by the name of Rebekah. Rebekah's story begins somewhere around chapter 25 in Genesis. She was the wife of the wife of Isaac. She was the mother of twins. Of her twins were Esau and Jacob. These spellings are wild. Esau and Jacob. She favored Jacob. She liked him better. You know, when they were kids and they came up and they said, "Mom, who do you like the best?" I'm sure she didn't hesitate. She said, "Oh, Jacob, you're my boy." I don't know. Anyway, she liked him. She liked him better. She pulled a trick on her husband on his deathbed. She manipulated things so that Jacob got the blessing intended for Esau. And Jacob then becomes the father of Israel instead of Esau. So we can really shortcut that. And fabulous stories. The story of the food, the prepared food, the conflict between Esau and Jacob. The stories are fabulous. The story of Jacob's quest for the love of his life, which leads us to the first of two wives of Jacob, and that being Leah. Leah was a plain woman, apparently. She wasn't considered beautiful. She wasn't considered the most desirable of young maidens. But her father still wanted her to marry. We look in Genesis 20, chapters 29 through 31, and a bunch of other places. I've got several references to Leah shown here. The story of Leah is interesting. Instead of receiving Rachel in his marriage bed, he ends up with Leah. So he ends up married to Leah. And Jacob, being an honorable man, he continues. He's her wife, his wife. So she's his wife. So he has another wife. So he stays another 7 years to win the favor of the girl of his dreams. The girl of his dreams. And the girl of his dreams was Rachel. Now, by the way, the older sister, as a result of this marriage, ended up having more children than did Rachel, who we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. I think she had, I believe it's 6 children. And I think they're all listed there for you. And I won't read all of their names because I can't pronounce a couple of them probably. I do want to mention, well, I'll hold off on this and I'll mention them both together in a moment. You'll see that the number doesn't equal 12 in just a moment. Rachel becomes Jacob's wife, and she has trouble conceiving. But she finally conceives and has 2 children. And she has let me get my notes back here. She has the children. She was the mother of Joseph, whom we just talked about, and of Benjamin. She was the favorite of Jacob's wives, and he showed early on. He showed a lot of favoritism towards her. Rachel had trouble conceiving children, so Rachel wants to give her Benjamin more sons. So what she does is she gives her handmaid to Jacob as his wife, and he has I believe it's 4 children with her. Now Leah also gives her handmaiden, and I'm not going to pronounce that name. It's a look. All right, no, I'm not. I was doing this at home and it sounded funny to me, so I think the names are written there, so you can read them, and I won't feel silly. Her had 2 children. Now, under Jewish law, we show that she had that under Jewish law, these handmaidens' children were considered to be Leah's and Rachel's children. But they were all Jacob's children. But they were considered the children of Jacob, and the children of each of his wives. It's kind of funny, isn't it? So that's what we have in terms of patriarchs and matriarchs. Now, if you notice, Rachel, one of Rachel's children is who can tell me who is a pivotal child?
Joseph.
Who?
Joseph.
Who else? Maybe I'm not. Who is the mother of Judah? Nobody know? And why was Judah so important in Christian life? Yeah, Rachel is in the genealogical line of Jesus, because Jesus came from the tribe of Judah. So there is a way. It does flow forward into the New Testament. All of this is really important to know. This all has value, as we say. These are not just words and they're not just stories. These are stories of the living God and of Jesus Christ, and of our salvation, and of our history and our future. All come from these stories. At this point, we're going to begin to talk about, shift gears, we're going to begin to talk about the law. We're going to talk about the law, and I know that Greg and that Dr. Cobbin mentioned in the law, they talked about oral traditions. But you can't really talk about the law without saying a word or two about the oral traditions of the law. The oral traditions. The law was handed down orally by law. It was shared among the people by word of mouth. God spoke before there was written language. Do you ever think about that? Moses first heard from God through the voice coming from a burning bush, not from a written word. Most of the words from the scriptures were heard first through the spoken word before they were read. in the first chapter of the Torah, the word to speak was heard is shown 11 times. God spoke 11 times. He didn't write it down. He spoke. Greg talked about the creation last week. What did God say in Genesis 1? He didn't say, well, I wrote a memo and a plan, and I expect for this prescription to be followed, and for the sun to launch, for the animals. He didn't speak. He didn't write us into existence. He spoke us into existence. By the way, the first occurrences to the written law does not appear until in the Torah for the first 80 chapters until the giving of the tablets to Moses at Mount Sinai. That's in the second half of the second book of the Torah, which would be Exodus. The Torah means the law. Now, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible. The first 5 in the Jewish Bible is referred to and is known as the Tanakh. It is also the first 5 books of the Christian Bible. It is pretty much exactly the same. Tradition tells us that Moses is the author of the Pentateuch, which is the reference to the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah, along with Joshua, can be seen as the account of how Israel came into being as a nation, and how it came to possess the promised land. The Torah is not just the law. It does not just contain laws. Somewhere around half of it contains law, and the balance, as we've seen, is really written history, Jewish early history. There are instructions. There are all kind of instructions and laws and so forth. But there's a lot of other narrative in Revelation. The study of Revelation of the books of Moses in the Bible is just an absolutely fascinating study that every time I go through it, I learn lots and lots that I didn't know or realize before. We're going to just so that you'll know, and I know everybody knows this, and this you can say in order, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those are if you get those down, you got 5 of them. You only got 61 more to go. Gary has a lot less because he knows the prophets.
Don, is the Torah that Jewish document that sometimes presented in Jewish services as a scroll?
There are Jewish scrolls, and at certain Jewish ceremonies, the scrolls are carried around the room, and I believe it's probably some of those scrolls. I don't know. I've never been to a bar mitzvah. I've been to a Jewish service when I was a child, but I don't remember the scrolls being carried around. A friend of mine who recently passed would talk about how the honor of carrying the scrolls through the room at his nephew's bar mitzvah. The Mosaic Law. What is the Mosaic Law? The Mosaic Law sets out the Torah, and the Torah is considered the authoritative source of Jewish law. In fact, they looked to Jewish law over civil law. Again, we see conflicts throughout the Bible with civil law. Jesus had conflicts both with civil law, but he had as many conflicts with interpretations of Jewish law, with interpretations of the Sabbath, with interpretations of diet and other things. We can look through the scriptures and some of the parables that he tells, and we could easily pull those out off the top of our heads. In early Christian life, the Levites were the keepers and administrators of the law. Just to give you some examples of what are in the Jewish law, guess what? The Ten Commandments, or I call them the moral laws. Okay, are a part of these laws. We have some areas we have other laws. Wait a minute, I skipped. Back up. Don's braille slipped. Actually, his hand did. The content of the law is spread among the books of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. And it is important to remember that they are reiterated, added to in Deuteronomy. So I don't know, where would you go? Where would you go if you were looking? I would probably begin in Leviticus. My problem, the Ten Commandments appear twice. They appear in Exodus and Leviticus. I think, is that right? Or is it Deuteronomy? Deuteronomy, excuse me. They appear twice. So that's because that's where they're codified and where they're consolidated. Now I want to give you some examples of the Ten Commandments. As I said, there are the moral laws, there are the social laws, and there are other terms, and I've broken these down not exactly correctly according to Jewish law. I couldn't pronounce all those names either. Those dealt with property, inheritance, marriage, divorce, etc. There are other laws. The food laws. Oh my gosh, the food laws. Remember the food laws. Remember Peter in the tanner's house who had the vision from God with all of that nasty seafood and food hanging down there on the net, and God says, eat it. And so these were the laws about cleanliness and uncleanliness and about authority. And if you are a practicing Jew today, you would not let one food touch another. I always wondered where my grandson got that weird idea that if food touched it, he wouldn't eat it. If gravy touched his potatoes, he would leave his potatoes. How weird can you get?
That's why they have those divided plates.
That's right. In order to cook in a Jewish fashion, it takes a lot of patience. Purification laws. We know about purification laws, and it talks about diseases and about female bodily functions, and male bodily functions and excretions, and I'm avoiding trying to be a little gentle here.
Sounds like some 7th grade boys would enjoy studying.
Certainly does. See Tish if you'd only know.
Yeah.
So the celebration of festivals and so forth. There are laws that govern those things. There are laws that govern the religious functions and so forth of the priestly caste things that they must follow. There are lots and lots of laws. In total, there are some 613 laws that have been codified in Jewish law.
Tom, do you have any idea what the origins of any of those laws was?
Yeah, they were trying to find a way, trying to find a way to live. What's the reason for law? Why do we have law? Is it just to get a little money for the coffers, or what?
Anytime you get more than one person, you have to have laws. So what I'm thinking is, I mean, how did they get the notions out? I know they say pork is unclean, but they've never been around the cow is equally unclean.
Laws.
There's a lot of things that just don't understand the origins of.
Society lives by laws. We live by rules. Society cannot exist without a rule of law. Even societies, Hammurabi's Code, you name it. We can look at our own laws back to Western European traditions for the way our laws codified and so on. Law is important, and so this was their way. I think they probably went a little overboard, don't you? But the interpretations were strict. It got so in the ruling bodies in Jewish law in Jewish tradition spent a lot of time interpreting and talking about the law. It was important for them to do that. So at the beginning of the lesson, I asked you a couple of questions. I said to you, remember at the start, why spend our time studying the Old Testament? Well, hopefully I've given you a couple of reasons, and maybe some more thought that you can think of in studying the Old Testament. Why study the Old Testament? Well, you see, there's value in this, and it relates to our overall study of God's Word. It is my opinion, strictly my opinion, that you cannot understand Christ's ministry unless you have knowledge and working knowledge of the prophecies of the Old Testament and the Old Testament itself. Christ's ministry is if you look at it, it follows the prophetic prophecies of the Old Testament as relates to the signs of Christ and others. So it is important and it's crucial. I think we have made a mistake by not spending as much time in the Old Testament as Christians. Sometimes it's difficult. The names are hard. I just ignore them sometimes. By the way, there's a Bible app, an iOS app that tells you how to say them. And when I have to, in my class, when I have to speak them, which I have to do, I work real hard at it because I can tie my tongue around my teeth really easily. Secondly, I would like to ask you to contemplate contemplate Christ's ministry, and keep that in mind. Keep in mind what I said to you, and why we encounter the Jewish rules, why they were important, why was Jesus so opposed to some of those rules? Why were they so unreasonable? We see examples of the Old Testament. I just spoke of one, which was Peter's vision. There are many others. And so I hope what I've done here, and going through this quickly and leaving a whole lot out of this, I hope I've given you some concepts and some ideas to think about. And it is 5:30, but if you all have some questions, I'll try to take a question or two, and then we will close. And boy, I get questions or comments. Either that one or that good. All right. Well, thank you all. It has been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it. I love studying the Bible. A number of years ago, when I retired, it dawned on me that I now had time on my hands. I thought. That's not true, by the way, when you retire. You don't have time on your hands.